Ancient Ethiopia first appears as a geographical term in classical documents in reference to the Upper Nile region, as well as all certain areas south of the Sahara Desert and south of the Atlantic Ocean. Its earliest mention is in the works of Homer, twice in the Iliad and 3 times in the Odyssey. The Greek historian Herodotus specifically uses the appellation to refer to such parts of Sub-Saharan Africa as were then known within the inhabitable world. In classical antiquity, Africa referred to what is now known as the Maghreb and south of the Libyan desert and western Sahara, including all the desert land west of the southern Nile River. Geographical knowledge of the continent gradually grew, with the 1st century AD Greek travelogue The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea describing areas as far south as Zimbabwe. Alpha Theta Iota Omicron Psi, meaning burnt face, was used as a vague term for dark-skinned populations since the time of Homer. It was applied to such dark-skinned populations as came within the range of observation of the ancient geographers, i.e., primarily in what was then Nubia, and with the expansion of geographical knowledge, successively extended to certain other areas below the Sahara. Before Herodotus, Homer is the first to mention Ethiopians. He mentions that they are to be found at the east and west extremities of the world, divided by the sea into eastern and western. Hesiod speaks of Memnon as the king of Ethiopia. In 515 BC, Silax of Carianda, on orders from Darius I of the Achaemenid Empire, sailed along the Indus River, Indian Ocean and Red Sea, circumnavigating the Arabian Peninsula. He mentioned Ethiopians, but his writings on them have not survived. Hecataeus of Miletus is also said to have written a book about Ethiopia, but his writing is now known only through quotations from later authors. He stated that Ethiopia was located to the east of the Nile, as far as the Red Sea and Indian Ocean. He is also quoted as relating a myth that the sciapods lived there, whose feet were supposedly large enough to serve as shade. In his histories, Herodotus presents some of the most ancient and detailed information about Ethiopia. He relates that he personally traveled up the Nile to the border of Egypt as far as Elephantine. In his view, Ethiopia is all of the inhabited land found to the south of Egypt, beginning at Elephantine. He describes a capital at Meroe, adding that the only deities worshipped there were Zeus and Dionysus. He relates that in the reign of Pharaoh Psamtik I, many Egyptian soldiers deserted the country and settled amidst the Ethiopians. He further wrote that of Egypt's 330 pharaohs, there were 18 Ethiopian pharaohs before Shabaka of the 25th dynasty of Egypt. He asserts that Ethiopia was one of the countries that practiced circumcision. Herodotus tells us that King Cambyses II of the Achaemenid Empire sent spies to the Ethiopians, who dwelt in that part of Libya which borders upon the southern sea. They found a strong and healthy people, although Cambyses then campaigned toward the country by not preparing enough provisions for the long march. His army completely failed and returned quickly. In Book 3, Herodotus defines Ethiopia as the farthest region of Libya. Where the south declines towards the setting sun lies the country called Ethiopia, the last inhabited land in that direction. The gold is obtained in great plenty, huge elephants abound with wild trees of all sorts, and ebony, and the men are taller, handsomer, and longer lived than anywhere else. Other Greco-Roman historians, the Egyptian priest Manetho listed Egypt's Kushite dynasty, calling it the Ethiopian dynasty. Moreover, when the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, the Hebrew appellation Kushite became in Greek Ethiopia, Ethiopians, appearing as Ethiopia, Ethiopians in the English King James Version. Agatharchides provides a relatively detailed description description of the gold mining system of Ethiopia. His text was copied almost verbatim by virtually all subsequent ancient writers on the area, including Diodorus Siculus and Photius. With regard to the Ethiopians, Strabo indicates that those who are in Asia and those who are in Africa do not differ from each other. Pliny in turn asserts that the place name Ethiopia was derived from one Ethiope, a son of Vulcan. He also writes that the queen of the Ethiopians bore the title Candace, and avers that the Ethiopians had conquered ancient Syria and the Mediterranean. Following Strabo, the Greco-Roman historian Eusebius notes that the Ethiopians had emigrated into the Red Sea area from the Indus Valley and that there were no people in the region by that name prior to their arrival. The 1st century AD Greek travelogue known as the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea first describes the Horn of Africa littoral, based on its author's intimate knowledge of the area. The Periplus does not mention any dark-skinned Ethiopians among the area's inhabitants. They only later appear in Ptolemy's Geographia, but in a region far south around the Bantu nucleus of northern Mozambique. According to John Donnelly Fage, these early Greek documents altogether suggest that the original inhabitants of Azania, the Azanians, were of the same ancestral stock as the Afro-Asiatic speaking populations to the north of them in the ancient Barbara region along the Red Sea. Subsequently, by the 10th century, these original Azanians had been replaced by early waves of Bantu settlers.